All right, so get this. We are diving into some serious internet drama today. TikTok, MrBeast, the U.S. government, even whispers of Zuckerberg. It's a real who's who of power players. And the stakes, they're incredibly high. You guys have sent us a ton of info, Reddit threads going wild with theories, news articles trying to make sense of it all, even comments from MrBeast himself. So what's the mystery we're trying to solve here? Did TikTok actually try to pull a fast one? Like with a fake shutdown? Is MrBeast really about to become like the king of TikTok? And just what is the new Trump administration's game plan here?
Yeah, what's fascinating here is that we're not just dealing with an app. We're dealing with a clash of ideologies. You have concerns about data privacy, the potential for Chinese influence, and on the other side, you have this massive cultural phenomenon that's become like a cornerstone of how people communicate and express themselves.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. Let's lay out the facts. Biden signs this bill back in April 2024, basically saying, ByteDance, either sell TikTok or it's getting banned in the US. Now, fast forward to January 19th, just 2 days before that deadline. And suddenly, TikTok users in the US get a message saying the app is temporarily unavailable.
And this is where things get really interesting. TikTok claims it was a technical glitch, but a lot of people, especially on Reddit, are calling it a blatant manipulation tactic. It created this huge wave of panic right before the deadline, almost like they were trying to force the government's hand.
Right, and to make things even more suspicious, one user pointed out that TikTok switched to Akamai International hosting the day before. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but what it means is they moved their data to servers outside of China. That's not something you do overnight. It suggests they were planning for something big, and users were picking up on that.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, switching to international hosting, it could be a way for TikTok to appease U.S. regulators, potentially making it easier to sell the app to a U.S. buyer.
And speaking of buyers, enter MrBeast. Remember back in January, when he kind of casually mentioned wanting to buy TikTok? Well, he just dropped this video where he's literally on a private jet saying he's going to make a crazy offer for the app. He even teased about becoming CEO. Can you imagine the kind of content we'd see then?
Oh, absolutely. He's certainly got the financial resources and the marketing savvy to make a serious run at it. I mean, his success with MrBeast Burger and Feastable shows, he knows how to build brands and engage audiences.
For sure. But here's where the trump card comes in. Despite being super vocal about banning TikTok during his campaign, now that he's in office, he's extended the deadline.
That's right. And while initially, TikTok seemed open to selling, recent reports suggest they might be reconsidering. It almost feels like they're testing the water, seeing how much they can get away with.
Yeah. And just to add another layer of complexity here, Trump is reportedly looking at a plan where the U.S. government would take a 50% ownership stake in TikTok.
Wow. And let's not forget, he's also said that he's open to Musk buying TikTok. So we have multiple potential buyers on the table, each with their own motivations.
Yeah.
And implications for the future of the app.
Exactly. So on one hand, you've got these official statements and news reports, but then you dive into the Reddit threads, and it's a whole different world. People are convinced there are these behind-the-scenes deals and power plays happening that we're not seeing.
Yeah. The lack of transparency is certainly fueling speculation. People are looking for answers, and when they don't find them, they start filling in the blanks themselves.
Right. And one of the biggest rabbit holes people are going down involves this guy, Jeff Yass. He's like this billionaire hedge fund manager who was a major donor to Trump's campaign.
Right. What's intriguing here is that Yass's company, Susquehanna International Group, owns a 7% stake in ByteDance. So you can see why people are connecting the dots and wondering if there's more to this story than meets the eye.
Totally. And then there are the claims that TikTok's algorithm has been changed. Some users say the For You page feels different, and they're not seeing the same kind of content they used to.
Yeah, some are even saying that the algorithm is being nerfed, which essentially means it's being manipulated to limit the reach of certain types of content. Now, whether that's happening or not is up for debate, but the fact that people are even noticing these subtle shifts speaks to how attuned they are to the platform.
It's true. And to add fuel to the fire, both Facebook and Instagram now have official TikTok accounts.
Well, hell yeah.
Wouldn't it be crazy if Zuckerberg was somehow pulling the strings behind the scenes?
It's a possibility, though it's important to consider the context. Meta has been struggling to compete with TikTok for younger audiences, so it makes sense that they'd want to have a presence on the platform.
I guess so. Okay, so let's try to sift through all this noise and get to the heart of the matter. What are the real concerns here, beyond the conspiracy theories?
Well, the biggest concern, and the one that's been driving a lot of the political rhetoric, is data privacy. TikTok collects a massive amount of data on its users, and there's been a lot of debate about whether that data is being shared with the Chinese government.
Oh, right. And it's not just about the Chinese government, right? I mean, all social media platforms collect data. It's how they target ads and personalize our feeds. But the concern with TikTok is that this data could potentially be used for more nefarious purposes, like surveillance or even political manipulation.
Exactly, and that's a valid concern, especially given the growing tensions between the U.S. and China. This whole TikTok situation is playing out against a backdrop of increased competition and mistrust between these two superpowers.
Yeah. It's almost like this one app has become a proxy for this larger geopolitical struggle.
It is. It's a microcosm of the challenges we're facing in the digital age, where the lines between national security, corporate interests, and individual privacy are becoming increasingly blurred.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener? Well, first off, it's a reminder to be mindful of the data you're sharing online. All social media platforms collect data, not just TikTok.
Right. It's also a call to be critical of the information you're consuming. Don't just take things at face value. Do your research. Consider different perspectives. And ask questions.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to engage in the conversation. These are complex issues with no easy answers. And it's important to have open and honest discussions about the role of technology in our lives.
Absolutely. And speaking of conversations, let's get back to MrBeast and his potential bid for TikTok. What are the chances of that actually happening?
Well, he's got the money, the audience, and the brand recognition. Plus, he's got that underdog appeal. That might resonate with TikTok's user base.
True. However, TikTok might not be interested in selling, especially if they feel like they can weather the storm and come out on top.
Yeah. And even if they are open to selling, and MrBeast isn't the only player in the game, we've got Trump hinting at a government stake, and then there's always the possibility of another tech giant swooping in.
It's true. It's a high-stakes poker game, and it's hard to predict who will fold first.
But one thing's for sure, the outcome of this saga will have major implications for the future of social media, not just in the U.S., but globally.
Absolutely. It could set a precedent for how governments regulate tech companies, how platforms balance user privacy with data collection, and how we as users navigate this increasingly complex digital landscape.
So as we dive deeper into this rabbit hole, let's keep those broader implications in mind. It's not just about one app. It's about the future of the internet as we know it.
Right. And speaking of the future, let's explore what a U.S.-owned TikTok might actually look like.
Would we see a more Americanized version of the app? Maybe less emphasis on those viral dance trends and more on, I don't know, baseball highlights or something?
It's certainly possible. If the U.S. government or a U.S.-based company takes control, there might be pressure to align the content with what's perceived as more mainstream American values.
Yeah. Some people on Reddit are worried about increased censorship. They're saying a U.S.-owned TikTok might crack down on content that's critical of the government or promotes viewpoints that are considered controversial.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern. We've already seen how other social media platforms have struggled to find a balance between free speech and content moderation. And with TikTok's massive reach, any decisions about censorship would have significant implications.
For sure. And then there's the question of the algorithm. Would a U.S.-owned TikTok tweak the algorithm to favor certain types of content or creators?
Well, it's certainly within the realm of possibility. Algorithms are incredibly powerful tools, and they can be used to shape what we see and how we interact with information online.
Right. I guess the big question is, would a U.S.-owned TikTok still feel like TikTok? Or would it lose that unique, kind of chaotic energy that made it so popular in the first place?
That's a great question. It's a delicate balance. On one hand, you have the desire to maintain the platform's essence, what made it so appealing to users. On the other hand, you have the pressures from governments and regulators to conform to certain standards.
Yeah. It's a tough spot to be in. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway you want to leave our listener with?
I think the biggest takeaway is this isn't just about TikTok. It's about the future of the internet and the role of technology in our lives. We're at a crossroads where governments, corporations, and individuals are grappling with how to navigate this rapidly evolving digital landscape.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It is, but it's also an exciting time. We have the opportunity to shape the future of the internet, to ensure it remains a space for creativity, connection, and free expression.
Absolutely. And that's where you, the listener, come in, stay informed, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to ask those tough questions because the future of the internet, it's ultimately in our hands.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the most fascinating stories from the world of tech and culture.